I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your cattle market summary for the week ending October the 5th, where we had steady disappointment. We've been steady here for quite some time now. We're at the time where we need to be making strides on this fat cattle market, and quite frankly, your guys in the Northern Plains aren't trying hard enough. They're not digging in. They're busy with harvest. They've got a lot going on. They start selling cattle on a Monday or Tuesday, and it just kind of takes the legs out from the guys that are waiting to sell them in the Southern Plains and trying to hold out for more money. But you could have found some positives in the fat cattle trade this week, but we need to be seeing big positives here. We've gotten done with all of our heavy supplies of market ready cattle. These packers are still keeping these change speeds moving and slaughtering a lot of cattle in their plants. They're having to see disappointing drops in the box beef cutout values, but they still got big margins. They're still making big money, and it's the time to be making some strides right now. But everybody just seems like they're happy with steady north of I-70. But you know, it'd be nice to build a little bit more market position for the down the road. But let's look at the board for last week. Your October live cattle futures. Monday was up 22. Tuesday was up 30, and we saw some 112 trade in the Northern Plains, but then it backed off. But Wednesday was down 77, Thursday was up 42, and then Friday up just 17 cents, with the board really not doing a whole lot. October ended the week at 113.80. That was up just 35 cents for the week. December ended the week at 118.15, which was down 70 cents for the week. Your first day of you can notice for delivery is here on Monday. So, you know, we don't know if we'll see any, but quite possibly could see some. It's a $2.80 negative basis there. You could deliver some cattle on, but it'll probably take another week or two if this board doesn't get straightened out, that we could see some deliveries, but who knows. October feeder cattle, Monday was up 47 cents, Tuesday up 42 cents, Wednesday down $1.20, Thursday down 90, and Friday back up 80 cents, with your October feeder cattle contracts ending the week at 157.77, down 40 cents for the week. November was up just 17 cents for the week at 158.22, but not a whole lot of going on there. We've just kind of been jostling around here in the same area on the board here for a few weeks, and we're not gaining any ground, and we need to be. Your fat cattle trade through Thursday, 62,800 head. So they milled around and sold quite a few cattle through the week, and the Southern Plains had not even established a price or sold anything. But in the Northern Plains, Monday through Thursday, they had sales from 110 to 112. Should have never settled for anything less than that 112. Your weighted average through Thursday was 110.56. So there was a lot of cattle off that 12, a lot of cattle at 11, but too many cattle at $1.10. That's still near steady. Your dress sales were actually a bit better this past week, and even through Thursday, 174, a lot of that, and 175. Your weighted average was 174.82, and that was mostly $1 higher. Then on Friday, we finally established the market. Kansas sold cattle, Texas sold cattle, and then the holdouts in the Northern Plains and then western Nebraska and places, they finished up at 111 mostly. There was a little bit of 111.50 in western Nebraska, Wyoming, out there in places like that. Not enough really to call it any better than steady, but nevertheless there was a little bit of a premium paid up there, and that was late in the afternoon on Friday. So, you know, we've got a lot of bullish signals out there. Then 175 was the number on Friday when the bulk of the trade happened, and a little bit of 175.5. So same thing on the dress as there was a live, but the dress was soundly a buck higher, but still mostly steady, and we'd sure like to gain some ground, and we would like to this week. Box beef cutout values, on the average of last week's trade, choice cuts 204.30, 77 cents lower than the average of the previous week's trade. Select cuts, 192.93, 91 cents lower than the previous week's weighted average. And the choice select spread on that weighted average price was 11.37, and 601 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. Your slaughter was pretty decent, but not as good as the previous week. 643,000. That was 7,000 less than the previous week, but 7,000 more than the same week a year ago. Your feeder cattle markets. We had a wet weekend around, but through last week, we were still selling cattle right up through Friday and had good movement. Had heavier receipts than we've seen last week or even the same week a year ago, but real-time index 157.15. That was up $2.26 from the end of the previous week, so you know we gained ground there. Cash feeders were $2 to $4 higher in your sales. Calves very uneven. You know, now is the time of year where there's a lot of calves and there's a lot of people buying calves, but we usually see the demand meet the supply pretty even. What doesn't meet up is we don't have enough people wanting the unweaned calves. We don't have enough people wanting the heifers. We don't have enough people wanting the mismanaged cattle or the plainer type calves. So your good weaned, long-time weaned calves in big bunches from Reputation consigners, they were steady to stronger. But your unweaned ballers, your fleshy calves, those types that are not as attractive. Now that we saw some pretty big discounts and growing discounts, you know, from $2 to $5 off of what your weaned calves are selling, at least in addition to what they were selling before. So bigger, stiffer discounts. You know, we discussed we had a wet weekend all through the mid part of the country, had good rains down here in the southern plains, really going to pop that wheat pasture if we get the sun back out here in the next week or two. But up in the Midwest there in Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska and everything, just wet, cold wet. Well, you don't want to be getting unweaned calves in when it's wet and muddy, and the temperatures really starting to change, getting the coldest weather that those cattle have seen in a long time. But you know, the farmers are busy right now. If I had unweaned balling calves, I would wait. I would hold them if I could, because the demand for those will be much better when the farmers get done with harvest. Now we'll find out here on Monday what percent we're done, and it'll probably be over half. With today's equipment, they can make so much ground up so fast, and weather was pretty agreeable last week, so probably got a lot of work done. But I would wait until those farmers get their combines blowed out and power washed and put away before I would sell balling calves, because those are the guys that can handle them the best. They may not have the best facilities, they may not have the best know-how on how to pull sick ones and all that, but they are going to feed them heavily and a lot of supplemental feed. And if you can get those balling calves in there, get them on the ground, give them something they like to eat, whether it's some silage or some feed that's got a lot of molasses in it, something that they really want, they will go to it. And once you get those calves eaten, that is over half the battle. You've got guys that are wanting to turn cattle out on wheat or maybe dry winter those calves or something. They're not going to give them enough to eat to really make that weaning process easy. Yes, they will feed them, they'll get them by, but they don't want to ruin their gain that they're going to get out on a wheat pasture. That's cheap gain. Now your farmer feeders, they're going to feed those calves out, and they don't mind fleshy calves, because they're going to keep putting the flesh on them. They're going to keep rolling that good sweet feed to them, and it makes it easier to get those cattle over the weaning process. But you've got those guys that are down in the southern plains. They're just going to shut those calves up for a couple of weeks, maybe 3, give them enough to keep them healthy, and pull the sick ones and doctor them and try to get them over it, so they can still turn those cattle out where they're not overly fleshed and that wheat or whatever they turn them out on is really going to taste good to them, and then they'll go to town on a cheap gain. I'm talking like 30 or 40 cent gain compared to what you see if you feed those cattle, more like 70 cents or 80. I know we've been seeing a lot better cost of gains than that, but that's been on hard yearling cattle that will gain 50 to 60 cents there on that cheap corn, especially up in the Midwest. And I know you guys that are a long way from the cornfield say, oh, there's no way you can feed them that cheap, but they're feeding them that cheap, guys. Anyways, but whenever you're selling some of these calves, make sure that when you take them into the sale that you tell the guy there, either the owner, manager, the guy that's unloading them, make sure you tell them what those cattle have had. If they've been weaned, how long they've been weaned. Actually, if you're going to sell them less than 30 days weaned, I wouldn't say nothing, because that's worse. A lot of guys would rather buy calves right off the cow that morning or the day before than they would some that's been weaned a couple of weeks, because that's just setting them up for a big fall. It's just like when you go on vacation or you're busy, you've got a lot going on, you've got a lot of blood running through you, and you're all excited and it keeps you from being sick. Then the second you land and let your guard down, bang, you get sick. Same things goes with these calves. You know, they're pulling them off the mama there, and they're real excited about that, and they're bawling, they're pacing, they're going back and forth. Then they haul them into the sale barn. That's a lot of stress. Running them through there, sorting on them, hauling on them, a lot of stress, and the calves still look like they're all right, but then the second you try to give them some muchly needed rest, they break on you. And that happens more often than not. But tell those guys how long those cattle have been weaned, especially if they've been weaned 45 days. If they've been weaned 45 days, you make sure somebody knows that and will announce it at the time of sale. You make sure that they know what those cattle have had. Don't just say shots. Tell them exactly what they've had. Tell them the name of the product that they've had. That makes a difference on a lot of these buyers, whether it's a live virus or a modified live virus, whether they've had Pasturella, what all they've had. They want to know what they've had. Give them the name of the product you give them. If you give it to them twice, make sure they know that. But, you know, they need to know that, but they don't have to have all those acronyms going along with them, like BQA and PVP and all the different programs. You don't have to overpay a veterinary to give all that stuff. You can still do the work yourself and just make sure that somebody knows what those calves have had, where they've been, how long they've been away from their mother, even what they've been eating. You can't tell guys enough about what you've got. And you need to have a good relationship with your selling agent, with your commission man. Tell him exactly what you've got. If you can get him out to your place, if you're selling enough cattle to get him out there where he can look at them and start telling people, tell him a week before too. Don't just show up at the sale and dump your cattle out. If he doesn't appreciate your business enough to listen to what you've given to those cattle, what kind of cattle they are, what they've had, and so forth, then he doesn't deserve the cattle. Find somebody that does. But some individual quotes. Fort Scott, Kansas. I guarantee you they'd listen to you if you called them and told them you had some calves to sell. They'd tell exactly what they had and where they've been and the whole rigmarole. But they had 60 head of 794-pound steers. Fort Scott, Kansas, 158.50 on a Saturday. Now let's go to a big premium sale up in Nebraska. Lexington, Nebraska. 218 head of 677-pound calves, 177, and then a big string of heavy yearlings, 242 head of 900-pound smooth steers, 162.85. That's a look at your week's markets from Home DV Auction Office here in Canyon, Texas. We'll talk to you next week.